Okay, so welcome back to autumn, and I've thought it'd be a really nice topic to have a go at our much loved kind of harvest time of the year. It's just one of those really fantastic themes, isn't it, that we see where you just think, oh, it's lovely. It's that time of year again, where you get the fabulous stubble fields and you can have a little walk around and you get that lovely smell, don't you, where it's just starting to turn into the end of August, beginning of September. It's just turning, isn't it? It's a bit damper in the mornings, etc. But you get that lovely kind of smell in the evenings and things as it's warmed up. So I thought that might help us just to kind of give us a really lovely sense of the season. We've got some other choices. I've put these other ones on. So this one actually is rosemary topping, which is just not far up the road, really. And that's sort of, I love that when they've got all their hay bales and things in the field in front. It's so lovely. But then there's all sorts to choose from, or you might choose one of your own as well. But I've just picked a few, so they're all quite different. These two are kind of a little bit more, typical of our skies. Then we've got like the lovely evening one, the dusk one. And then another one here where we've got this looks kind of dusky time, doesn't it? Where the sun's setting down on the Harb combine. So whichever one you fancy, that's absolutely just go for it. Or as I said, one of your own. What we're thinking about, and it applies to any picture, any of these pictures at all, but what we're thinking about the most is when we're applying these layers of paint with acrylic, we can layer up. It's so different to watercolour where we have to leave all the spaces for the white paint, but with acrylic, we can layer them up on top, one on top of another. So we can even put the white paint over black if we want to. So it makes it really quite a much easier process in some ways. But we're having to think a little bit, our brains having to think about, what comes first at the back of the painting, and then we add the subsequent layers over the top. So it's a really kind of a flexible paint. We can make loads of errors and it's absolutely fine because you pretty much just paint straight over them. And you can chop and, change things around. So the only thing I would perhaps do is I've just got a pencil, whichever one you decide to do. I'm going to go for the rosemary topping one because I just love that scene. But go for whichever you want. And all I'm doing is just going to deconstruct the landscape and just literally work out where to put everything. But I'm hardly putting any drawing on here. So if it's easier, particularly I know the one with the hay bales, this one actually, to place all those hay bales in the right size order can be a bit overwhelming. So something you can do really easy is just draw with a pen a 4-quarter grid over the reference picture that you're using, whichever that one is. And it just helps with laying things out. So you can quite clearly see now there where that particular hay bale goes here. The same with the one with a row of hay bales. You can see how much of the big hay bale goes and where, etc. it goes. So it's really helpful just for getting some things set out. So you can transfer that grid if you want to onto your paper. Just do it really lightly. So with acrylics, because we've got quite a lot of light colours in here, we don't want to put big dark lines on that are going to be difficult to remove, or when we paint over them, it kind of can muddy under. It can come through a bit muddy. So, so this one I'm not going to put my 4-quarter grid on really because I can pretty much see that that's just about, this one is just about under halfway, the bottom of that there. I can also see if I wanted to kind of just put a little line, I can also see that that hay bale comes in. So I'm drawing anything that's fairly big. I wouldn't probably put the tiny hay bales on, although you can if you want to, if you feel like it'll give you more position. Better place a position then. Okay. And I'm just kind of popping in just the bottom of where this field comes here. There's another hedge there, isn't there? And whereabouts in the top section here that goes. So all I'm doing is putting chunks in. I might need to make that a bit darker, actually, it's very bright in here. And I'm doing it really, really briefly because we just end up painting over all this, so there's really no point in doing too much. It's just enough to make you give you a bit of confidence as to where your colour sections of colour are going in, and that's it really. And then I'm just going to follow this, follow this bank of trees all the way up the side of the hill, crossing over. That's one midpoint now. Crossing over into this section and popping roseberry topping there. Just a general idea, because the other thing is we can move and shift any lines we want with our paint once we lay it down, which makes it easier. Sometimes we get so caught up in the drawing of things that it just takes away kind of the pleasure of the painting. So I'm just going to mine a bit far over, obviously. But again, as I said, it doesn't really matter. Just pop them in. There we go. So I've just got the top section. I might just put a little bit of where this bank comes briefly, just so I know that I'm going to put a different colour in there. And then I've got these big banks of trees coming round, and I'll sort those out a little bit more as I work into it. Got a bit bank of the grass, so I'll make that a section because we've got that grass colour going up the bank. And then pretty much I'm just going to leave that as it is, and I'll put the more of the detail of the trees in as we go. So yeah, so even these the lines and things, I'm not going to put those on. So anything that's on the top layer that isn't like a base colour, we'll leave until, and build those up and build them up as we go, or we can build them up before. So the other ones I think are fairly straightforward. Actually, they're really kind of more straight, aren't they? The lines on those. Things like if you chose the combine one, that one is, I would probably pop the combine. You might want to just do the square body of it and then put the other bit over the top once we've got the background in. So there we go. So thinking about, again, coming backwards to forwards. I mean, I'm personally, I'm going to work top down, so it's quite easy to do that because we tend to, with the lands, particularly the landscape with the sky, we tend to know that the sky comes behind everything. So if you get that in, you can then kind of work forwards, but you don't have to. You don't have to be restrained to working top down completely. But I'm going to put the sky in just so it's a good starting point. So in terms of colours, I've just got a little palette there, paper palette. In terms of blues and things like that, and layering up cloud, this cloud's quite straightforward. If you've got a sky that's got lots of yellows in and things like this one, then, and you've got lots of overlayering of thin cloud, then what you might want to do is mix up as many of these different colours as you can. I would perhaps be putting the base down of that colour first. The sky, I just choose kind of a basic blue there, but then start to layer up the darks and things. But this one, I would have all those colours ready, and then I would apply them whilst they're all wet and quite a bit more thickly. And then you've got the option then to blend them a little bit more carefully with a brush in. Whereas this one, and this one, and this one, I'm just going to pop on with a nice flat brush. But again, it's just thinking about the colours. So a great chance to explore blues. So I've got ultramarine, which is classic kind of, let's say, British skies, really. I'm going to try a bit of that. I think I need a bit more than that. But if you're not sure how much to pop out, I'd say probably want a good 5p piece if you're doing a A4, and a bit more 10p maybe piece size if you're doing an A3. This one is a phthalo blue. You might have something like a bit of more Prussian blue or something like that. It's just a very different tone. So this one gives us more of a baby blue, and this one gives us more of kind of you get some more depth in there. You might have cobalt blue, or you might have, you know, kind of a turquoisey blue. That's fine as well. You can experiment with those. And there's lots of ways of changing the blue that you've got as well if you've only got one blue. So I'll go into that in a mo. It just gives you a huge spectrum of colour that you can use. So we can, you know, we can warm our blue up here with a bit of like just make it slightly more greeny actually if we want to, just with a very tiny touch in there of a bit of a greeny colour. If we're wanting it to be a little bit more, have a little bit more depth to it. I'm just going to put some white. So we always have like usually with skies have a tint, mix it with a bit of white. When I say tint, that's all it means. You're just mixing the white in. And then, so I'm going to have a go. I'm not going to go right the way down under this cloud. I'm going to go pretty much all around here to make sure I'm covering it and it shows through a bit. But where it's just cloud, I am just going to build that up separately. Or I might make a very like light tint in that. So you can use, look, you can use a palette knife if you want to mix, or you can just use a small, you know, your smallest brush to mix it. Sometimes you use a small fine knife. What have I done with it? Use me rattling about in here. Go. And I've got a little bit of a tester paper because it's really helpful to test your colours before, and then you think, oh, it's fine. That one I've actually put on, I quite like. You know, sometimes we end up putting it on. Sometimes things because we're not quite sure, we've not had, you know, we're not sure what colour they are, and then we're not very happy with them. So it's just a good way of, you know, alleviate it. So again, you know, you won't know how much white to put on until you start to kind of go in and start mixing it. But I always put a small amount of each paint to start with and build up, and that way you're not wasting all your paint at home as well. So start with a small amount, and you can always add more of each, you know, of each amount. So I'm looking at that. It's not quite got quite enough depth for me. I would like it a bit more turquoise, but again, you know, I know it's a while since we've been here, but of course, you can always go with a colour that you prefer. You do not have to try and match things identically. If you mix a colour up and you think, oh gosh, I just love it, then that is a sure sign that you need to do it. So I've just added a bit of phthalo blue and it just gives it a little bit more depth. So I'm just going to try that with a little thin brush to start with, just to see if it gives the effect that I want. Also, I'm just going to move this over. I'm also just going to pop my little light on the, there we go. I think as we lose the light, it starts to, so I'm just going to try that. Okay, I quite like that. I'm going to go just a slightly bit lighter, I think. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of a white tint into that mix. But again, you know, these are decisions we're having to make as an artist. All of you, you know, just think, how much do I need more? Do I want less? What do I like, really? And I'm just going to test it again until I know definitely. There. So also sometimes what happens is towards the horizon it gets lighter. So you may even want two tones. You may want a little bit for the top, and you may want a little bit, but slightly lighter for the bottom, which is what I'm going to do. Decided. So depending on the brand of paint will depend very much on how it goes on. And you won't know that until you try and do it. So what I'd say is, unlike watercolor, you probably don't want it running, you know, so it's so runny, it's running down the page. You want it to be hold fast on the paper with acrylics, just because we can blend it when it's thicker. You can blend it when it's really thin, although you'll lose kind of the opaqueness of the paint. That's kind of one of the beauties of it. So just add a little bit of water, enough so it feels really kind of like soft buttery without it running, without the butter that's going to run, so it kind of holds its shape. And I'm getting both of these paints ready at the same time so that I can blend them a little bit together so we don't end up with two lines. So There we go. So I'm going to go in with a darker one up the top. And all I'm doing is just getting these backwards and forwards motions in with my brush. When you do that, it kind of blends it quite nicely as you go in as well. It overlaps those different lines there. I'm going in here and we start adding a slightly lighter one to it whilst it's still wet. Oops. I might add a bit much, so I'm doing that. You can always change things at last minute. Don't stick with anything if you think, oh, I'm actually going to do something to that. I'm just going in with that. And here. And as I said, even if I make a mess and bring that line right away into my hillside, it doesn't matter because we can take the hillside back over. That's the beauty of the acrylics. Sometimes we forget how flexible they are. They're super. Right, so I'm going to go in with a really light tint underneath here. Just put a little bit in the middle there where I can see that cloud coming over. Now, I am going to wet my brush just a tidge and just get the edge of this to take off the excess then. Just kind of blend in that because I don't really want a line. Sometimes, lines are great and sometimes we don't want them. So just taking it out a little bit now. So it's, there we go. And it should feel really easy. If it feels stiff, you need to add a little bit more water so it goes on nice and smoothly. Or add more paint. If you've got quite a buttery paint, you can just add plenty more paint and it will glide backwards and forwards. So either of those things. Sometimes people would like to use it really thickly, and other times people like to use it really thinly. So I'm just going to go in with a really light tint here. Put more white in, and that's what I'm going to put underneath this cloud. So it's really light blue. Where this cloud's going to go here. I'm going to build that up, but I'm going to start with a bit of a tint there so that we've got a little bit of a base to put it on. And I'll make sure it's going to almost coming into my hillside because it's easier to do that. There we go. And add a little bit more blue back in that middle bit there. You can see it's coming through those clouds. And it'll look quite messy. So the one key, just a reminder to everybody, is that it always feels quite messy before it feels like it's going to be an actual picture. So because we're adding lots of layers, we just need to kind of keep going and adding the layers and just have faith that it will come and happen, which it always does. But it does look quite childlike at times as acrylic to start with. With this one, again, you can get all your light ones in the background and then start to bring in some of the dark ones, and then pull over the different layers. If you're looking for that peachy colour, you might want to have a little bit of yellow, a bit of a warmer red colour, and then a little bit of a white tint as well. And then you can go in with different yellows as well and add white, light tints with those, or keep a vibrant yellow in there. So there's lots of different choices with that. So you just work at the pace that you want to work at. I'm just adding a little bit more kind of bluey, lighter blues in there. So I'm going to start to think about the cloud or the mist that comes over now. So just going to start to build up this cloud here. Now it's quite grey in places. Well, ideally, what we want to be doing with the cloud is we put any darker tints on first, because what we don't want is to flatten our clouds down at the end. And we will do that by putting the darker one on at the end. So if we find a kind of a colour, so what we can pop on to get a grey, rather than putting black on, because black actually is quite a heavy colour, it doesn't tend to occur in clouds actually. So if we pop on, you may have a light grey actually that's a different kind of mix, or the way I do it is I'm just adding a tiny bit of brown to my palette, a dark umber. It's this one. It's one of the really dark browns. And I'm also going to add a little bit of red. Move this up so you can see it. Lots of red. Mine's Acadian red. It's slightly warmer. So when it's slightly warmer, it's got more yellow in it. If it's really a cool red, it's more got a lot more blue in it, so it looks it tends to look darker. To be fair, that's one easy way of saying it. And I'm also going to add a tiny bit of like a purpley colour as well, a very small amount. I might pop some of these in. And a little bit of yellow. Sometimes these colours, yeah, it's probably not going to need the yellow in this cloud. Some clouds do have yellow when they've got warmth coming through them, and it's a cloudy, like almost going to rain. You can weave in a bit of yellow, but I'm not going to do that. I'll use that later on. So I'm just going to mix, having a think about just this dark cloud over here. I'm going to start with a white base. I'm going to add a little bit of the blue. I've gone for the phthalo blue, but you can use ultramarine, either is fine. Okay, so we're going to end up with a bit of a tint there. And then I'm going in with a touch of, I'm going to go in with a tiniest touch of brown, really tiny, it's like minute. So the brown won't kind of deaden and flatten off your it won't flatten it like black quill, but it just gives it a bit of a tinge, you know, a bit of a greyish tone. So I'm just going to add a little bit more. I might test that just to see if it's turning a bit. Okay, it's still a bit warm for me, is that? So I'm actually just going to put in the tiniest bit of rose to that. Very small. That sometimes turns it more grey. Very small amount. Right, I'm just going to put the lights on in the studio actually. Okay. It's going very, very dark also. We forget, don't we? It's starting to go dark early. So I'm just very kind of gently adding. You could add a bit of purple if you wanted, a bit of violet or something. I'm just going in slowly and surely to get the colour that I'm after. Okay, I think I'm happy with that base for a kind of a blue grey that's just going to help with the darker areas of the cloud. So, you know, you can go in again with a flat brush if you want, or you can go in with a round. These are quite cumulousy clouds, aren't they? So they're quite, it just definitely feels like they're a bit more, it's a bit of a rainy element to them. And even though not all of the cloud over here has got this grey tinge, and that's the base I'm going in with, because we can pop in some of that flat. So I'm just going over the top. I'm kind of just creating, you can just use your brush to kind of create just kind of little, you know, kind of round circular movements. It kind of creates that fluffiness of cloud. But what I'm going to do is use that as a base to build up the other colours on the top of it. So we're going to get lighter and lighter basically. And that will give, whoops, our cloud a really good 3D effect. I'm still going in here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just a slight lighter tint to that now for the next few other ones underneath it over this side. Just behind. You can also do this with your fingertip, which is really good fun, but I'll kind of show you that in a moment. Just kind of just bring it on and just move it around with your finger. I know we've done that before, but it's another really nice way of getting this kind of light clouds. So bringing in this again, I've just got little circular movements, but you can go any which way you feel comfortable for you with your brush. I'm just adding in a lighter one. I've not gone to bright white yet. I'm still on a bit of a tint here. It's just got slightly more white with it. When we then add the really light areas, it just totally pops. And we get that very much that 3D feel in the clouds that we're trying and get. It's the same way you build up the light layers of mist as well. You're just kind of building up one layer over the top of the other. And then some of these on. And then start to add a bit more. Things behind those we're tapping. A little bit, I haven't gone really bright yet, but I'll go a bit brighter. Now, if you get to the point where it's quite, you want it a little bit, you don't want it quite so thick, then just thin that paint down much more. And you can do this, you can add a thin layer over thick with acrylic. If you want it to be more misty effect, you know, not quite so solid, and just thin it right down, and it becomes a little bit more translucent, so you can almost see what's coming underneath it. And we can make it up anyway, you know. You don't have to stick with it, you know, if your clouds are slightly different, that's fine. So again, we're just building up that different layer of colours on there. I'm going in with a slightly brighter white now on here, and I'm trying to pick out the areas that are more white. And then you end up as well, you can end up with the really bright ones. And all of that, so we'll have like the dark of the shadow of the clouds, the kind of mid-tones, and then the brighter ones create that 3D effect, because we have the dark shadows which recede and go backwards, and then the light ones that come forwards, the lightest, and then in between creates the shape and depth. And we're just building them up like that, just kind of keep building them. And again, you know, everything looks a little bit, at this point, looks a little bit odd on its own. Once we start to actually get the landscape in front of it in, it changes again. So in, put some darker ones in again. But it's quite a nice process, isn't it? Once you start kind of like getting those wiggly movements, and it's quite good fun. And again, building up some lighter areas. Just keep doing that really until you have just pure white bit. You know, if you've got any really bright bits in there you want to pop, just pop them in. With the, when I was saying about using fingers, I'll do it on this bit here. You can literally just go in and just soften the edges down like that. Just kind of tap it around, and it just genuinely creates a bit of a softer edge, which is really quite nice. It feels more, you know, feels less kind of solid. And then we're creating now these lovely, really great areas, aren't we? Like that. There we go. And then we'll end up with 3D clouds. We can't always see it when we're sat very near to it. So one thing we can do is just as a reminder is just to take a little step back or get someone to hold it a bit away. That works quite well. So I'm just going to lighten up a little bit this guy as well. Behind. Quite a bit lighter behind here. I've not noticed that. Quite like to put that in. But most of the time we try and get the back in first. But if there's something that you've seen, you think, oh, I'd like to change that, then just go for it. Pop it in. Just got to be a bit careful how we apply it. So I'm just going to put it on a bit more thinly. Just want a little bit top of that really nice bright colour underneath and behind. I'm just going to thin that down with my finger then. Just going to drag it over. You can do that with clouds and kind of drag things around. Okay, well, I'm going to stop there for a minute and I'll do a first pause because it's our first week back, isn't it? And everybody will be getting back into it. So the pause. Okay, so we've got kind of the start of our sky and everything, and we can always go back and have a look at it a bit later on. We're not tied to anything. So we get a change of water. It's really important to change your water with all these different blues and things, otherwise you end up transferring those across to the warmer colours, which can give it a bit of a grey tinge, a bit of a muddy tinge. So obviously I've got the roseberry topping one, but depending on which one you've got, you might have this lovely line of trees. And again, we're looking at which is which layer to put on first. So we're looking really at popping kind of just move this one out of the way, popping some mid-tones on there and just getting started with a base colour really. You can go you can go to your darkest, or you can go to, I tend to go to a mid with acrylics if I'm honest, and then dark. So I would, apply a mid-tone, not the lightest, not the darkest, just a mid one, and then I tend to put my shadow on. So, you can use fantastic colours, bases for, this one's got foliage, but fantastic base colours for, you can use like yellow ochres and those kinds of fabulous colours as well. So I'm just going to pop some more out on my palette. So this one is this is a buff titanium, which is quite good in autumnal colours. You can use yellow ochre. I think that's the reason actually I have used buff titanium here. It's not necessarily, it's basically unbleached titanium white. And you can use it instead of titanium white just to give a softer colour if you want to. It's quite stone in colour. Get some more yellows. We've got all these fabulous yellows, haven't we, coming up and things like that. Warm ones. This one is more like a Acadian yellow. This is called Azo yellow, but they've all got their own name. So you've got the warmer yellows and you've got the cooler yellows, like the lemon bright, the acidic lemon yellows, everything in between. So it's just got less warmth in it, less red, leaning towards red. You can go with oranges. When we start to actually think about all of the ones in the landscape, and these ones as well as all beautiful. You've got like some browns in there. You can use this, which is a fantastic colour. This one's Venice red, but pretty much burnt sienna. All of those lovely autumnal colours that we find. You can use orange. We can use all sorts. And what I'm going to do is encourage you as we go through this, certainly when we get near the front and you've got kind of some of those colours kind of coming out, is to just really kind of explore using some brights. You might want to use bright yellows or some pinks or whatever it is you can see in there. It just kind of lifts our landscapes really well. So I'm going in now. I'm just going to start to pop in some of these stone kind of colours before I add the greens. So I'm going in with a bit of titanium, a bit of brown. One of the tips we can do at the back of the picture is to just add something a bit bluish into it. I haven't with this because I've got quite a dark one, but I'm going to just add the tiniest bit of blue. The reason I'm doing that is like dark colours, cool colours also recede into the background. And if we add just a tinge of blue to it, it will again feel like it's going backwards. So sometimes people say, oh, why is my painting coming forwards, the back of it? I can't stop it. And I say it's because it's maybe too warm or light. You want your darker, cooler colours at the back. So if you can always drop a little bit of blue or something in there. Just to, there's a little trick really, but there are some brighter areas. So you can use your brush in any way, use the flat one again, or you can just kind of just add, all we're doing is creating shapes. What we don't want at the back is any detail. We just need to know that it's rock without actually putting in lots of the detail, because again, the further back we are, the less detail we want. Otherwise, again, that will come forwards at us. Save the detail for the front, you know, to make that kind of come forward. What we can do is just work in some of the different shades we can see, you know, and the shapes. That helps a little bit to make it less flat. I'm not putting any real bright highlights in there though, just slightly. Might add a very slight lighter tint in just the occasional area where you just get a bit more. Yeah, you could do the, just go with whatever colours you think. You know, the dark ones, tend to try and pop some of the darker ones in before I've got the highlights generally, so it doesn't flatten down that final bit of highlight that we've got in. There we go. That's all I'm doing to that. And then when we've got all this different foliage, it's just thinking again how we can use different kinds of greens. So you'll have all sorts of different greens. So I've just got sap green here. The same when you're doing all the different colours in the field, you know, just find a base colour and then you can explore the other colours. So like at the back, where you've got the foliage, where you've got the hay, make that slightly cooler by just adding a little bit of brown. So it takes out a bit of brown or something like that, that just takes out any of the warmth. And then coming forward, you've got this lovely warmth of the sun here, and that comes forwards a little bit. So we can just change the tone ever so slightly, which is really helpful. So I'm just going to go in with this particular green, which is a bit of a sap green. I think it might be this particular brand might be called Chrome. But then I can use different colours to make it warm or cool. I'm actually going to put some blue, ultramarine blue in it for the back. And just to put, because green is a warmer colour, just adding a slight amount of this ultramarine blue, which is quite good for darkening things off. And also it will feel like it's going backwards a bit as well. So it's more of a blue-green going back. And all I'm going to do, again at the back, we don't want too much definition in. I'm just going to use my brush and pull down the shapes in it. Just with that cooler green, start to create a bit of the depth in there. And I'm just kind of popping in some of the shapes with my brush. I can adapt, you know, you can always adapt it a bit later if you want to. The other colour you can mix to make the green darker is brown as well. If you want to get some different patches of colours in there, so they're not all the same, so that you can differentiate between the different clumps and things like that. And that's exactly the same for when you're doing the harvest. the feels and things like that. You can pop some different colours between so that it's not all the same and it will stand out a little bit. So I'm just trying to get in some different, quite slight different shapes and colours in there. And again, it's at the back, so we're not going to really look too much on that. I'm going to put a little bit of that greeny blue in there, just right over here. And this is where the fun of kind of making your own mark making when you're doing this or the hay is really lovely. You can just tap it in and have fun with it. Just go for it. Enjoy the process of kind of just getting into painting. There we go. Yep, just keep adding these in. So you might have some clumps that look quite a bit darker where the shadow is, for example. So I'm going to pop those in now. Now I'm kind of coming on to my bigger bits here. I'm just going to go and get some of those more shadowy areas. I'm going to mix it with brown this time, not blue, so that my dark shadows are ever so slightly different to the other ones at the back. We're going for clumps here. I'm just kind of tapping it in with the brown brush, but again, you can use any. If you're doing the hay, you can just use like a little flat brush and pull it up or down, or an old bristly brush. Experiment with that. So I've just got like the dark areas on, but if I want to add, I might want to start adding a few more mid-tones, more sap green as it is. And I might also, as I'm coming forwards, eventually, let's go over the top of that, actually start to add in some warmer colours of green. It's just so that we can, like, when there's a lot of one colour going on, it's what we put between it. So like here, I'm going to go in and put some real depth in now underneath these trees. Now you can also use as a colour a green called Hooker's Green, which is a really dark colour. That's quite a handy colour to put between. And the phthalo green sometimes is quite dark. Or you can just mix it with a bit of brown. So it's how we get these shadows between things without it feeling really false. So in nature, we tend not to get like kind of big clear circles. We tend to have to like work the shadow in between so it feels a bit more natural, where we would get those natural the depth, to show the depth between things of the bushes and everything. So I'm just adding those shadows in. And again, that starts to make it feel much easier to understand what's going on as well. And get those shadows in. And I mean, some people can just see those shadows to start with. I find that I have to really look for those when there's a lot going on like this. I tend to get a bit of a mid-tone in, then a bit of a shadow between, but just work how it feels easiest to you is what I would say. And as we're coming near the front as well, getting more. I haven't got any brights on there yet, but will have shortly. I've just got this mid-tone. I'm going to start adding in some real pops of bright in there as well. I'm just enjoying tapping it away with this round brush. You find, just explore the brushes and see which you're enjoying using. Or the palette knife. Or your finger. It's all to just have a go and enjoy, really. Yeah, so just kind of adding in these patches, putting the shadow between. So that's exactly the same process when you've got this straw, is to, where do we start? So start with if you want to start with a darker colour and then start weaving in some of the directional movements. Trees are fairly straightforward because they obviously go upwards generally, but you can see like they're getting some of those directions. To get the contrast, you need the shadow in there, and you need the warmer colours, and then eventually some of those lighter ones to pop. And the same with the fields. So you can see between where there is some depth, where they're quite deep, you get these shadows. And then you might get a pop of colour in there, and then you've got a highlight on top, and that's what creates, these helps to create these lovely rows. So it's amazing to think about there. So I'm just going to get some of these. The depth between these. Just making some of these shapes. Okay. So then obviously we've got highlights as well. So once we've got the shadow in, that's when we would definitely add the highlights over the top. So it could be a bright, it doesn't have to be like a tint, or it can just be a bright. So, I'm looking at some of these brighter greens in here. So I have to take my green that I've got, and then I'll add, quite a vibrant yellow to that, just to get that brighter colour in there. Choose lemon yellow, and if you go too light, you need it. Just add a bit more of a warmer yellow backing. So I'm just going to try and pop in this field here. Sort of bright that field, but again, that's just using similar green. But you can get it's called yellow green, which is a great colour. On its own, if you want to, if you get really into the landscapes. And then we can start to see, whenever we get more tones in there, that just adds much more depth to our painting. Well, it takes away any flatness that we would have had, because we start to layer in all of these areas, and these brights actually really help with giving shape to everything. So I'm just looking now when it's got to go. So we're just looking all the time at observations, really important. And then I'm just going to use working some of these into the foliage, and that's when we'll get, same as with the hay, you add those into the mix that you've got. You start to see some more depth in your actual trees and fields, because there's a contrast between them. It's the contrast that helps a lot. And that contrast can be of varying things. It could be contrast between dark and light, a bright and a dark, and then we've got the light in there as well. So that makes it much more three-dimensional than just using two colours. which works really well. And then you start to see, you know, all the different colours once you start looking. Generally, it's where the light catches them where we get these little pops of colour as well. So it makes us really aware of the light, which is fabulous. You know, the light on the hay, the light on the fields, the light on the. Once you start looking, you can't unsee it, can you? It's great. Oh, so there we go. And again, you know, keep working your way forwards. Go in with a base colour for everything. And then go, you know, you can warm things up, cool things down. I'm going to go in, but this is quite light. I mean, this one is very different. So we've got shadow side for these. Here we've got, this is very much side, this is very much in the shadow. So you can go darker naturally with your base colour in those ones. These ones are some areas, it's not till we get to the front, we get more texture, it's a bit more dynamic, but I am going to bring in the fields a little bit further. So it's not, it is lighter up here. I might even mix two different ones, one that's a bit more straw coloured, one that's not. So what can we do? Let's see. I think I'm going to go, rather than with my buff titanium, I'm going to go with this. Just get some colour mixed up, to avoid that blue on the palette. And I'm not worrying too much. I mean, I might even add some pinks and things like this to this, but I'm just going in with one base colour here, a little bit brighter. Right. And the vibrant with that, because that's where the sun is actually, even though it's at the back. But we can counteract that by just putting less detail in. Just going to get some base colour down, not worrying about it too much. You can do it as you go if you want to. That's another way of doing it. It's kind of like get that texture in place. And then I'm going to make just put a little bit flat down here, and then come another pause and see how you're getting on. See if you're enjoying that process. I tend to try and go in some direction, because what you can do, especially if you're putting the paint on a bit more thickly, you can bring it round and leave, you know, almost leave track in the paint, which is one of the benefits of acrylics. You can, you know, use that to create the texture between the tracks, as well as, you know, getting some shadows between those in a minute. Around. And we're just following the direction, aren't we, of what we can see in the fields here. Which is lovely. You know, and then you can be brave, you know, once you've got your shadows and things, just really brave with the colour and see what you fancy, because it's amazing how well it works when you put some pops of, you know, bright colours like oranges and colours like that. Because we're using a very neutral palette, it's very, you know, it is very neutral, very kind of natural colours. Adding in some brights really lifts the painting. Right, I'm just going to take a short pause there and see how everybody's getting on. Okay, so having a little look at how we can recreate some hay and hay bales and things like that, which is a really fun bit of it to do, really, because the grasses and things are fabulous, aren't they? They just, you've got all this lovely, all the different directions that everything moves in, and you can play about with as much or as many different kind of tools and brushes as you want to, just to see what gives you the effect that that you're looking for, really. So I've just kind of gone in and just started to get a basic colour down there. It is really basic as well. Just going to top up my paint. I'm running out of some paint here. We're all enjoying getting in a good mess with it again. Let's see, let's find a yellow. But yeah, you've got oranges, yellows, all sorts of colours in there. Just have a really good experiment with it. So I was just using a round brush just to lay this, just kind of to lay it down. You can go with a really thick round brush, like a really big, big one if you wanted to get clumps in, or just, make it a bit less. So I'm just going to flatten down this colour a little bit at the back. I'm just kind of going in with a little bit in between. At the back, I don't want a really dark shadow at the back because it's quite light. So I'm just going in with this buff titanium just to create at the back some kind of shadow without it really coming forward. Because if I put a strong contrast at the back of a real dark in there with a light one, that will make it pop forward as well. So I want a subtle kind of a shadow colour at the back. So that's why I've gone in with this one. You could use a soft brown or whatever. But I've gone in with that colour. And again, there's not much definition going on at the back. It's just a suggestion that we've got some kind of a of the fields at the back. Just make sure I've got enough of this yellow in as well. But I just wiggle my brush about a little bit just to create something that feels a bit fuzzy. But yeah, I'll show you using a fan brush with some of these lovely kind of clumps that are a bit nearer the front as well. Okay. So we want some shadows, but again, because this is so light and bright, even the ones at the front here, they might have a little bit of brown in, but they're not going to be too intense. I'm going to pop in these lighter coloured so what you can see I'm doing at the minute, I'm kind of getting some of these rows in. I'm actually creating that just with a little bit of definition on the brush, just to get the shape of it. Sometimes with the acrylics, it's just about, a lot of it's about putting some shape in place with the texture of the paint. But we do need definitely this, a bit of contrast in here, especially because we want to show that there's a dip between each of these areas of the field. So I'm going in with some darker ones here. And all I'm doing is use the tip of my brush to get some of these in to start with here. Because they're a bit finer, I'm not going to really go in with my flat brush to start with here. Or a fan or anything. And then they're a bit ad hoc, aren't they? So when you're looking around, there are some deeper areas, but that's just how fields are, isn't it? Where you've got some areas that are a little bit more stubbly and a bit deeper. Getting those in. So this will start, when you put the dark in, it does start looking a little bit darker, but that's fine because we can work in some of those other colours in. So I'm just working around, certainly the ones at the front that are a bit deeper. I'm kind of popping in where I think there's some areas of shadow there. And then around that, you can use, you can go in with some other colours and get some of these different tufts and things in that are around the front. So when you start looking, it's interesting because you think, oh, actually, I can see all sorts of colours. You might see violet, you might see pinks, you might see browns, you might see purples. So it's kind of about experimenting with that side of it as well and thinking, all right, do you know what, I am gonna do that. So I've just got the edge of my fan brush here. And I'm just going to start to where I'm seeing those colours, and we all see colour differently. I'm just going to pull that up, look, just on the corner. So what it does is give you a really nice little just popping a few in over the top. I'm not going to pop them everywhere, just in a few little places. And then it's looking at the other colours that you've got in there that you want to kind of bring in as well. You can also kind of layer up two different colours as well on your fan brush. So what you don't want it is it's totally covered. Otherwise, you're not going to get that separation. So I'm just going to take off a little bit. You want enough on so there's plenty kind of on the tip, but not so it's going to kind of weigh you down. And then I'm just going to pull that over. So it just creates some of those lovely stubbles. And it is, what we've got is it's just part of the experimentation process, really, just having a little go with different brushes is quite interesting. Then you can add in, if you've got any highlights or anything, you can start to add those on top, where it's catching, particularly where it's catching the light. So, just kind of popping it on. I'm just using the edge of it now. I'm not even pulling it down anymore. I'm just using that edge to kind of get the tops in. You can do it like that, or you can even use a flat brush and do the same thing. And use it that way. But again, we're still going to need a bit of a tint in there. So, again, you can use the edge of the flat brush, get in those. Like that. There we go. And all we can do as we're doing it is just keep building that picture, because sometimes when it's on its own, we think, oh no, it looks awful, this little bit, but just wait until you've got the whole thing in and we'll create, have a little look at the balance of that. This hay bale here, I'm just going in with a very light tint because the sun is really shining on that, isn't it? So I'm just going to block that out like that. And again, when we've got all different elements in, that's when your eye starts to recognize, okay, I've got all different bits of this picture in place now, and it's starting to make sense. When we've only got a sky or we've got part of a field, etc., our brain doesn't like it. We've just got to keep going, and eventually it all just pops together. So when you've got like the baling, I always then go in and put the shadow in. It's kind of a confidence trick, because sometimes we're like, oh gosh, I just can't see it. So go in with your darker shadows, get all those lovely shadows underneath the hay bale where it would go, and you can kind of break that shadow up as though it's going through the hay. We always get a dark shadow underneath anything that's like that. Again, I'm just breaking that shadow up a little bit. Like there, I kind of pulled it through, which is, it tends to happen because you sometimes get dark ones over the top, but light bits of straw over the top. There. And it's all over this side, so we know that this is where the light's coming from this side down and downwards directly on here. So once we start getting that into place, it becomes a little bit more obvious. You know, if you've not got enough shadow, for example, and you want to make it a bit darker, then go in a bit darker. We're not always sure how much contrast we want until we get going with it. That's the thing when we're painting with these. So with this hay bale, so it's not flat. You can start, if you look at it, you can see that right in the middle, it's really light. That's obviously where the light is catching it. And I kind of like just put in this highlight here so we can see that. And then when you start to look at it again, you can see that actually there's a little bit on the top as well, where it's catching that light across the top. Rather than just having a line, you can kind of start to create a bit of a curve with it. And then the same underneath where it's a bit darker and slightly yellower because you're getting a bit more of a shadow, I would then create a bit of a curve underneath with that as well, with the brush. So what we're doing is we're starting to kind of create the shape of the hay bale. And then it's like, what else can I see? Are there any other colours in there? Well, I'll just leave a bit of that through. Or pink or whatever it is. And then again, I'm going to put this shadow on the end because you have got the shadow between there and the hay. I'm just going to put it in, break the shadow up a little bit. I'll have enough of it so it creates the end of that. And the same on this side, I'm just following the direction of it. There we go. And actually, you get quite a shadow cast behind that where the trees are. So just popping in behind that as well. Because there's trees in front of it. And there's quite a lot of shadow at the base of these trees. So once we work out where the shadow is, because what we're not doing is kind of drawing around the outside of something, we're actually just looking, observing where the shadow falls, and then we're putting it in, which creates the shape itself. So that's really, really useful. And then we can pop out, you know, all the different colours that we can see of the hay, hay bales at the side, you know, and just have it going in whichever direction. Don't worry too much about it. I think with the hay, the more you start kind of dotting it on and trying to, you know, just thinking how can I kind of create it, dots, lines, however it comes, you know, whichever tool we're using, just the more we just go for it, it becomes much more natural, I think is the word I'd say. What we're trying to create is our artist's impression of what we can see on the picture. We're not trying to recreate a photographic image. So yeah, so then you can still do the same with the bits of straw on there. You can, and the hay bale, you know, like put the highlights in place as well. Just where you can see them, you can make that really light tint if you want to. So we're with all of those elements together, we're starting to see that this is definitely, it's definitely a field. And we just keep going, creating all of these different rows that we can see. And like we said, you know, you can look at the different colours. I can see there's more brown over here. It's kind of warmer in the middle. I might even go for a bit of a browny yellow with that one. You could even go for orange, or you can go for pink. And I'm just using a flat brush now with these because these are much thinner up here at the top. But again, until you do it, we're not always sure what colour we want that. So you might put something on and think, oh gosh, that's really quite too intense for me, or oh, I need it, I want more intensity. So we're just working out those things as we do it. what we like to look at really is the biggest thing. Yeah. We're just kind of working our way through. And we just keep going, adding those different elements, layers, until we're happy that you've had a good go at recreating all of those kind of different elements in the fields. There's a lot to think about, isn't there, actually, when we're doing it? There's all sorts. The more we observe, just makes it much more interesting, doesn't it? So obviously that one's got to be, I need to build this one up here. It's a bit lighter at the back there. Got some more strawy colours. And you just keep popping it on. And just see how it feels. I think one of the nice things about doing things like the hay is that the more you start to just have a little go at texture, you start to really find the brushwork that you really enjoy doing. So that's a really important part of this, is thinking, oh, I didn't know I really like doing that. I've really enjoyed using A, B, or C type of brush, or dabbing, or you know, doing something just like a different, put this shadowing now at the front first. But really, we're just trying to create a sense, aren't we? That create a sense that it's this time of year, and we can get a feel for this stubble. We get a feel for everything going on in there. There's a big shadow here, isn't there? It's like a wall. So pop that in. And again, you know, have a look at where else you can see shadow that really needs to go in. I've got a big blue bit on there and I've just noticed and some probably a bit really on it. So yeah, so it's all of those different things, and you can just keep going in and adding a bit more. And then there comes a time just to have a little look at it and sit back and just look at what you've done, because the joy of this as well is that you think, crikey, you know, I got lost in the painting and being a little bit proud actually that you've just changed that canvas from totally blank to totally wonderful. There we go. We could always do more and more on things. This is the thing, we can always do more and more. But every little study we do, and this is what we're doing, we're studying these, we just add a little bit more onto kind of how we experiment with things and what brushes we use and the colours. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to leave mine there and come back to you and make sure you're all okay. And have one tiny bit of shade in there because I lost my shadow. And I think I'm just going to stop there actually. Come and chat to you. There we go. Right. So that's my last pause there. I hope you really hadn't enjoyed yourselves and got lost in it, which is all what it's all about.